Hello, good morning on day 79 of our 99 days, and that means that we are entering the final 3 weeks of our journey. So perhaps this is really kind of coming in late, what I'm sharing today, but I've shared it before, the 4 different flavors of not being good enough, how they can show up in your life. But for this session, I would like to go a little bit deeper on the different ones. And I was also inspired by a 5th one, which I'm adding today. And the reason why it's very useful now to share this. So this is about, just in short, and I'll repeat it later. This is about the different version of how your feeling of not being good enough shows up dominantly, like this repetitive theme you have. So it's either to be loved, to matter, to be seen, to be heard. And the next one, the extra one, is to be touched. And I've shared it before, and I've also shared many times my theme. And I've always shared it like it's to be seen. But it isn't. My theme is to be heard. It really has literally to do with the voice and with speaking up and not speaking up. And that's slightly different from being seen. And the reason why I do think it's very useful to share it now after so many days, because you are obviously more aware of your theme, your core theme, for yourself after digging in deeply within yourself, and become more aware of your thinking, your feelings, your actions, and sharing it now might help to really understand what your color actually is in this theme. And why that helps is because you can then more easily pick up on it. Like, okay, if this is my theme and this is now happening, how does my theme fit into this, what is happening? And for instance, if my theme is I want to be heard and people are not reacting to me, and that frustrates me or that's painful to me, then I know that I have to use my voice. I have to speak up in order to change things. That's where the change for me lies. It's not about being seen, because I've never felt unseen. But I so easily use that phrase because it kind of feels like being ignored. But you can be ignored in more than one ways. And the core for everyone is being ignored is the same as not being good enough, or being rejected is the same as not being good enough. But rejection comes in many ways, and we don't all feel rejected at the same time with the same event that's happening. The other reason why it's very useful now to share this with you, because you might be able to recognize the theme in others more easily now. And then it really helps to help that other person in his core theme. So if you have someone who has a theme of to be loved, and it's your partner, then it really helps to just confirm that that person is being loved, especially when you feel that that person is going down in its frequency, when it feels triggered. And the opposite of refusing to express that and actually reacting in an opposite way is only making that frequency going lower and lower, and that person, or your partner in this case, feels more not loved. And secondly, you can also help your partner or the other person where you notice this, to ask empowering questions, why that person doesn't feel loved in this situation when it's happening. Because then you get to the core of it, and people will recognize themselves and will recognize their pain and can shift more easily than if you use a different approach. So to go through this 5 versions, more slowly or more in depth. I've tried to come up with behaviors, how it might show to perhaps help you to feel the difference in nuance when I share something. And when I share examples of how behavior shows up, that doesn't mean that that's exactly it, how it shows up. It's just to give you a direction. Okay, that does feel right to me, or it doesn't feel right to me. And if you have other translations for yourself, like if I share something about to be seen and I translate it in a different way, then please share it in the group, because you might help others with a sentence that might feel more right to them as well as it felt to you. So this is just an opening to get more clarity, actually, what not being good enough, so your deepest core of lack belief, how that's actually showing up in your life. And I'm quite sure that it's, and no, I'm 100% sure, actually, it's always one theme. So you might feel drawn to more than one of these 5 versions. But actually, if, like I shared about my being seen and being heard, so it's the hearing thing and not painful thing, it's the hearing. Then there is a slight difference. And that nuance makes all the difference in how you can make the transformation, and by releasing this lack belief. And as it is a core theme in your life, as long as we're not fully awakened, and as long as we're not fully detached from our identity, as long as we're not fully one with our core essence 100% of the time, this core theme will come back again and again and again. And obviously, over time, while your frequency is rising and you feel more solid in your essence, so you're more connected to your essence, this theme will lessen and lessen and lessen. But that might take time. So while you're in this transition, or in this transformation period, it helped me a lot to just recognize the color of my theme, to just more quickly ask myself in a situation, what is it that I don't feel heard or feel seen here? And then actually shift it, or just sit with it, and okay, that's actually painful right now. I know it's coming from, and it's painful. It's just all pain that's coming up again. And that's okay. I just try to be with it, be compassionate with it, and then you go through the releasing process. So the 5 versions are, once again, to be loved, to matter, to be seen, to be heard. So that's HEARD, and to be touched. And the 5th one, to be touched, is actually coming from the exposition of Aaron Olaf, the Dutch photographer I went to on Sunday. And he had this Asian women sharing it differently. But this touching came up, and that was suddenly for me like, that's the one that has been missing for me. And then I will explain you why that has been missing when I touch upon being touched. So if I say to be loved, if that's your core theme, then that actually means that you've never felt truly loved. You've missed that in your youth. Either your parents were not able to do that, or your parents literally abandoned you, and or were disconnected to you. They might have been present in your life, but were disconnected on a heart level. Or you have gained this pain very young in another way, but mostly it's done by the persons you were raised by, who were not able to show love, and not even with words, but that you literally didn't feel loved. And there are always 2 ways how people react. You either have a more repressive way, that's more like an inward way, or you are a person who's more more expressing it in or reacting it in a reactive way that's more outward going. And that, of course, depends on the type you are. But then why I share this difference, because it might help you to see the huge difference actually in reaction. So if you are, your theme is to be loved, and you are a repressive person, a repressive type, then you might have had always difficulties in your life to find relationships. You might find it difficult to really open up and connect to someone, because that fear of not being loved is huge for you. So instead of going out there and try it out, you actually avoid relationships many times. So you might have recognized that you've been more alone in your life than being in relationship with a loving relationship. But if you have more reactive outward personality, then you might have always been in loving relationships, but you find it very hard and very difficult to be vulnerable and open up. So you've always guarded yourself not to feel hurt, and this time it's the painful one, not to feel hurt by the other person, of not feeling loved again. So you find other ways actually to suppress that, and you try to look for it in going into relationships with other. But while you were in it, you could never really reach the depth within the relationship, because it was really hard to open up and to be vulnerable, because what if you did not feel love again? Then that core pain is coming back again. And that obviously, to be loved also shows up in relationships with friends, and with even with animals perhaps. Although with animals it's most of the time very unconditional. So that also might be a reason why people who actually miss being loved easily connect with animals, or love to have animals around them, because that's so unconditional. And that's where the pain is less felt, because the animal is the pet is actually giving the love back to them. So being loved has to do a lot with relationships in an intimate and deeply connected way, where the challenge is actually to be deeply connected. So, of course, in all these versions, control issues and all the other defense mechanisms come up in various ways. But I just would like to stick to the, well, hopefully the more essence of it, as far as I can see it. To matter, the second one, I'm looking at my notes because I would like to get it clear for you. To matter is the person actually who, in his youth, always felt that like he was the person that really didn't matter. It didn't really matter whether you were present or not, whether you were there or not. You just literally didn't matter. Other persons around you, like siblings, for instance, did matter and got more attention and got more, literally more attention or more support in a way. And you felt always left out in that sense. So it was literally this feeling of, it doesn't really, I mean, you felt loved. So that's where the difference comes. You might even felt seen or felt heard but when you speak up. But the matter is more like, what I'm doing doesn't really make any change, either in this relationship or in this family system, or it just doesn't matter what I do. And life is not changing, or people around me are not paying more attention to me or loving me more. So when you have the more repressive way, the more inward going way, then you probably found yourself all your life kind of hiding behind people. You kind of always play the second role, the kind of assistant one, or you did not play at all. You touched upon many different talents you have, and you've tried many different jobs or So it mostly expresses itself in study or finding fulfillment in your life, but nothing really actually showed really the full you, because always this fear of not matter you were obviously avoiding, because you didn't want to have the confirmation again that you might fail if you did show yourself and share yourself with your talents. So that's a more repressive way. If you more have a reactive way, more outward going, then you might have reacted completely opposite, and you might have found a drive within yourself to really show that you do matter. So you felt at a young age probably very committed, and no matter what, you were going to prove yourself in this life. And that mostly turns out in a very focused and driven person who is either committed to his work or to his studies, and becomes quite independent as a person, because he knows that it's up to him or her to really make sure he matters. But of course, the pain underneath that is still feeling this deep loneliness, as is with all pains I'm sharing here. This deep loneliness of, if I don't do that, if I don't show up successfully, or if I don't matter, then I might not be loved, or I might be left alone. And obviously you're avoiding that pain as well. So you might overcompensate yourself on the other side, and work very hard or try to be successful. And then if something changes in that way, like you suddenly lose your job, or something external factor is actually completely changing, then you might have a complete breakdown, because your whole security you built around showing up for yourself, that you do matter, suddenly falls away. And if you've never showed that you matter, so you were more like the inward repressive person, then you have constantly the feeling like whatever I'm doing is not useful. So you've never been able to show your potential, and that's also that feels very lonely, and is energy draining, and it can even lead to depressions, or the feeling of a depression, like I really don't matter in this world, so I rather not be here. The third one, to be seen. To be seen is the one that's literally overlooked when I was young. It's the person that was always mentioned last, obviously not consciously by the parents or by the siblings, but it's just this one that was always forgotten, the one that was just left out on the invitations, and it happens all innocently, unconsciously, but for the child itself, obviously very painful. And it translated as not being good enough, in not being seen, as it literally wasn't seen. So if you're the repressive person, the inward going person, then you probably turned out in the gray mouse. I don't know if this is also an English expression, but the gray mouse is the person that just literally doesn't show, or is literally overlooked. People tend to forget the gray mouse because it just blends in with the surroundings. It blends in with the environment, and it's just silently there at the background, and very conscious worker who contributes a lot to what needs to be done, but it's never really going on stage to show his or herself. It's just very quietly, a little bit shy perhaps, someone who's at the background. It can have a lot of friends and a lot of relationships, can have loving relationships, but even in those relationships, it's always the one who is more at the background. And if you're more the outgoing person, then you actually do the opposite way. Then you really are trying to get the attention. You really try to be number one at the party, or to dominate discussions, or to to really make sure that you are being seen, and more like in a even in more like in an energetic way than just only by voice. So it really is also like the person that's is really present in energetically. So when that person comes in, everybody knows that person comes in, and obviously, or probably also make quite some noise to let everyone know the person is there. So it's compensating for the fact it didn't felt seen, and it's avoiding the situation of not being seen again. So it's kind of like often showing up quite inauthentically, because the only drive for that person is to really, or the drive, the goal for that person when it's showing up at work or at parties or in a relationship, to make sure that it's been seen. And that's also like overcompensating him or herself, so that you're kind of like you're walking on your toes. Is that English? To make sure that everyone sees you, and obviously also out of balance. The fourth one is to be heard. So that's the voice, the hearing. I always find it difficult the difference between heard and hurt. So this is the hearing thing. So the person who's not being heard when it was young was literally, there was no reaction when that person said something, or hardly any reaction, or not enough. At least at the most important moments, it didn't felt that someone was hearing, or it was cut off by like, it's not important what you were saying. Well, and obviously that's my theme. And now you can probably, if you know me a little bit, you can see the difference, that to be seen is not my thing, but to be heard is my thing. Because I never have an issue in showing up somewhere, and I never felt like the gray mouse. Neither do I feel like I have to overshout myself. It's just not the way I would like to be, to feel connected. I want to feel connected by being heard, and my pain is there when I'm not feeling heard. So if you're the silent one, if you're the repressive one, more inward going, then you're probably the silent one, if the theme is you're not being heard. So you're the silent one, the listener, the one that's like a solid, shows kind of a solidness, is like always there, but it's not really contributing to relationships in a dominant way. But when you're in close relationship with that person, it opens up more, or she or he opens up more, and then becomes less silent. But of course, safety is required to open up. Otherwise, this pain of not being heard is avoided, and then it falls back into silence. If you're more like the reactive, outward-going person, and you have this theme of to be heard, then you're probably more like using your voice to let other people know that you're there. So you might be the one who always knows best. You might be the one that's really outgoing and make sure that you have the best knowledge, or can be the best debater, or anything to make sure that everybody hears you. So it's slightly different from not being seen. It's a different way of getting attention. So one is more coming from, it doesn't really matter how I'm seen, but I'm sure I'm noticed. And the other person really uses his or her voice to get noticed. And it can be from a knowledge base, or can also be from drama, of course, can be from any version. So it's very closely related, these two things, be seen and be heard, but there is a difference. And then the fifth one, the new one for me, to be touched. And the reason why I was so grateful for this insight is because I know, and also from my practice as a coach, and also from my experience in my family, that there's really a difference in people, of persons who can easily make physical contact with each other, like touching the other person just on the arm, or the way how they hug. And persons, I think, who have the theme to be touched have difficulties in making this physical connection. So these probably are the ones who were, as a young child, not being hugged, not being picked up and held by the mother or the father or siblings. So they might have felt very isolated, and as probably happened very young as a baby, but it could also have happened at a later age, or experienced very traumatic experiences on intimacy level, on this physical intimacy. It doesn't just have to be intimate, but the way they deal with being touched is less natural. Well, it's not natural. It's kind of, they need a lot of safety in order to open up that they like to be touched. So if you're more like the repressive one, the inward going one, then you probably might have really find yourself having a lot of difficulties in being touched in the first place. So when someone doesn't have that at all and is coming to you and is really touching you physically, like on your arm or on your shoulder, or you might kind of have this reaction like withdrawing, feeling uncomfortable, or not really know how to react. And you kind of avoid that physical touch. If you're more the reactive, outgoing person or outward person, then you might have perhaps even shifted to the complete different way. This is the very extreme extent, but then you might be very focused on intimacy and sexuality, and that might even be for you a way to feel powerful, because it's not like the really intimate, loving touch you're actually looking for, because that feels very vulnerable, because that's what you never felt before. So you try to compensate it with more like showing power or self-assurance by trying to find it in a intimacy way. But then when you are intimate persons, then you might not, probably are not able to really be vulnerable in that situation, because you're more taking intimacy and sexuality more as like a means to an end, to avoid the pain, that the touch can be very loving. And as you miss that in your past, then this touch can be, well, it comes very close to your pains. So you avoid that. And you show intimacy, but you're not really there. You're not really connected with the other person. So those are the 5 ones I can come up with. And these 4 ones have been on my screen for years. This 5th one is new. But it makes all the sense to me, because I cannot really put the 5th one into one of the other 4 versions. So for me, it really is something, especially in this era we were living in right now. I think a lot of people are dealing with issues of to be touched. I felt left alone by parents who were not able to show that. Well, I want to leave it for here, because otherwise the session gets too long as well. So find for yourself which of the 5 ones you relate most with, and see how you can relate your experiences where you feel triggered, because that's then the entrance to this pain point, how this is translated then for you in one of the 5. And see and you don't have to find the right answer right away. What you probably have got the right, if there is a right. But it's okay if you don't find the perfect one right away, but you probably have two at least that are closely connected, and then you can find out which one of the two is actually more applicable to you. And then you know actually what you need sometimes from other when you really need to get out of that trigger. And it just helps you to release pain, but just acknowledging that to, for instance, to your partner, like I would then be saying, and I do that to my partner, like I really need you to listen now. I want to share this, and I want to feel that you feel connected when I'm sharing this. But that's an important thing for me, because I do feel loved, so that's not a question. So it shows up slightly differently, and vice versa. If you have a partner or a person you actually feel triggered most, a person that's very dominant in your life that triggers you a lot, then look at his or her theme, and then it might really release and ease the connection between the two of you if you can see what that other person actually needs. And then you can see, like, okay, this behavior, it always triggered me, but I know where it's coming from now. So I can more let go of it now and give him or her space what he or she needs, or give more attention if the person is more the repressive one, give more positive attention on the things that he or she actually needs, one of the 5 I just mentioned. So see if this helps for you to find deeper connection within yourself, how your pain is showing up, and to find ways to connect with others, to recognize their pain and help them in their process. Okay, I hope this one helps as well, of course. And I'll see you back tomorrow. Okay, bye.